Hey everybody, let me have a quick word on compressors, talking about compressors with you guys. And I'm specifically talking about the software versions, not the hardware versions, but most of us nowadays pretty much are dealing with the software versions in our DAWs with our computers and our recording software. And I'll get into another video talking about the hardware compressors, where they might be useful and such. But first of all, realize that a compressor in the first place is just an audio volume. It's an automatic volume control. That's really all it is. It changes the volumes under a set of parameters that you dial into the compressor. So that's all it really is. It's just a volume control. And it used to be said in the old days that if you used a compressor properly, you didn't even hear it. You didn't hear the results of it working. In other words, if you overused it, you would hear pumping sounds, and generally that's associated with too much compression or a bad attack release time. And I'm not going to get into the details of a compressor. I'm going to save that again for another video, but just your overall thing that I think you should really be concerned with when dealing with a compressor. Now, there's so many of these compressors nowadays that are emulating vintage hardware, and I think that's really fantastic, because a lot of the hardware I think unintentionally was manufactured in that it ended up being very musical sounding, and it would have a pleasing effect on certain sources, like on vocals and on drums and that sort of thing. And I think after it was designed and used and a lot of top engineers used it, they realized, hey, well, this compressor really excels doing this. In other words, a compressor has its own flavor. But like I say, when you're starting to get into a flavor, you're getting into where you're actually hearing the compressor. So I think it's really good to have a really clean compressor, and some of the plugins nowadays they don't inherit their own signature on it, and they basically are very clean and just do their job and do their job great, in that they control the volume in the parameters that you dial in on the compressor. And all this said, I think you can concern yourself with, boy, I'd sure like to get that version of the 1176 FET compressor, or let me get that old vintage LA2A that half a dozen people seem to be emulating nowadays. And that's fine, and quite, I actually own several versions of each of those. But I wouldn't concern yourself that that's what you need to go out and get first, and get a compressor that's going to add a flavor to your sound, because I think you need to go ahead and get the flavor going into your mic first, and then don't try to create a mojo with a compressor, but use it for what it is, to compress the signal, to go ahead and smooth out things, and to make the signal more pleasing to blend with other signals and that sort of thing. And then later on, if you really are have the golden ear, so to speak, and you see, oh yes, that compressor really sounds much better over another compressor, that's when you go ahead and start branching out. But I think if you're right off the bat saying, oh man, I got an LA2A recreation, $4,000 compressor, and I got it for $35, or I got it free with Persona Studio One, that's great, but don't make that your first goal. Make your first goal learning how to use a compressor, learn how to use the attack, release, the ratios, blah, 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 and then move on. That's really all I gotta say. Remember, a compressor is a volume control. That's all it is. Worry about flavor later. And that's just my 2 bits on that. I'll get off my soapbox. You know me on the soapbox. But anyway, thanks so much, and remember to subscribe.